Hey guys, so I decided to maybe help those people that really like a monthly wrap-up, and I'm taking all my clips from the books that I read in February and March and putting them into this video for you. If you've watched all my videos, you would have already seen these. I'm really not sure if this is a good idea or not. Should I do a video like this? I'm gonna give it a try. I know some people really like that monthly wrap-up, and I kind of like having a record of my wrap-up in this way, so I'm gonna give it a try this month. We'll see. Like I said, everything has already been in videos except at the end I will be wrapping up Anne of Avonlea because I finished this since my previous video. So if you've already seen most of these clips, feel free to skip in the timestamps to Anne of the Island. Did I say Avonlea? Definitely Anne of the Island. Even if you aren't watching the full video because you've already seen all the clips, I would love it if you would just give the video a thumbs up so that it doesn't do terribly with the algorithm. But yeah, let's get into, I'm pretty sure I need to do February because I did a December and January wrap up. So we'll start with February's books and then go into March's, and then we will wrap things up with Anne of the Island. Okay, my first two were short stories that I grabbed through Jessica R. Patch's newsletter. If you aren't subscribed to author newsletters, please do so. Find your favorite authors, subscribe to their newsletter. Sometimes they'll give out one of their books for free, or a short story, or somebody else's. So the first one I want to talk about is called The Book Club. This is by Carrie Stewart Parks. So I don't know, Jessica R. Patch didn't say how she got a hold of this short story. I am part of Carrie Stewart Parks' email list and I haven't noticed anything there. There's nothing on Goodreads. I'm confused as to where the book short story has come from. It's only 18 pages, okay, so it's super short, but we follow a main character who, like, it's 18 pages, so I'm trying not to say anything. She, at the beginning of the story, she's with her book club, and for some reason she goes outside and she comes across a body and things are suspicious. Like, honestly, 18 pages, what can I say? But she kind of talks to people in her book club a little bit. It's called the book club, so you know, those people are there. And the ending just was like, whoa, how did you do that? 18 pages. That's all I can say. The next one was a little longer, and this one was by Jessica R. Patch. It's called Nobody Has to Know, and we have three women. Mainly we follow one of them, but they're in this grief support group where they have all lost someone due to some, either a tragic accident or a killing. Like, there's always someone to blame kind of for what happened to their person, either the husband or I think there's like a sister and I can't remember. But the three of them, unbeknownst to each other, get invited to this house one evening, and they get the chance to kill the person responsible for killing their, you know, significant other in some way, whatever. And it's interesting to see, like, the moral dilemma. The ending was interesting. It was probably only like 50 pages, so once again, I can't say much. I know that you can get this one by signing up for Jessica R. Patch's newsletter. I think it's like right on her page, on her website, that you can sign up and get it. And the ending was very interesting. I didn't see it coming. Once again, super short. Wasn't really analyzing it a ton, but that was good. Then, oh, I got Castle of the Winds by Christina Bear. So my library so nicely fulfilled my request to get that on Libby. And so this is book 3 in the Secrets of Wormdale series. Unfortunately, I only give the book 3 stars, which has like lowered my motivation to continue the series, but it's only 5 books, so I will continue it. The main character in this book, though, kind of just grated on my nerves. So at the end of book 2, not a spoiler because this doesn't really matter, our main character Edith got invited to go to Wales to get some information on like dragon breeding or something like that. So she goes with Simon, who's like her neighbor and really good with dragons, and they realize that what they've been invited to is not what they thought it was, and things kind of go awry. And Edith just really bothered me. She didn't trust Simon at all, didn't value his opinion at all. It was just like headstrong and annoying. where I don't feel like she had been that way in the first 2 books. That being said, there was some really good humor. There was this line, I wrote it down. So Edith was saying, if I'm healthy, I'm supposed to be doing charitable work until I ruin my health. If I'm sickly, then needlepoint, until I build up my strength enough to visit the sick. I suppose I may have gotten away with writing under my own name, she writes under a pen name, if I wrote the correct sorts of books. Books about girls visiting the sick, or books about sick doing needlepoint. Yeah, I just thought that was funny. Also, there was another character that came into this book, and her name was Meredith. And the whole time I was like, is there gonna be, like, the last half of the word Meredith is the word Edith. So I thought maybe there was gonna be something about their names, because it seemed weird that we would have a Meredith and an Edith, but there wasn't. So that just was like, okay, that's a little strange, but oh well. I will finish the series. I don't know if it's on Kindle Unlimited, actually. My library doesn't have it. I should check if it's on Kindle Unlimited. Then I read the first volume of Emma M. Lyon. Oh man, so funny. Okay, so we've got, I don't know what the year is, 1880s, I think. And Emma is going to live with her uncle in this house that's supposed to be hers, but she's waiting till she's 21. It's kind of in trust until then, and she has to go live in the garret, so like the attic. Okay, slight interruption while I ask some giggling children to be a little quieter. Emma M. Lyon, where was I? She is stuck, like, living up in the attic. It's just a sense of humor, just hilarious in her journals. I really enjoyed it. She has like these hard things in her life that are so perfectly mixed with the humor, I feel like. And my biggest problem with it is I'm gonna have a hard time not binging it. And I don't want to let myself binge it because I want to savor it. So there's currently 8 volumes out, and I heard that she's still writing, it's by Beth Brower. She's still writing more, which is hopefully great. Hopefully it's not dragging on too much, but everyone that I've ever heard talk about it has loved it. And I think these are ones that I'm going to have to eventually own, because I was highlighting multiple things, and I'm learning that I like to annotate books either in my second go round if it's a like more modernly written one, or in my first one if it's a classic. But I think this would be so fun to go through again. But I've only read 1 book, so I don't have to worry about going through them again at this point. Where did I go from there? Oh, I started and DNF'd at 57%, which is really annoying. If I'm gonna DNF a book, I really want it to be before 50%, but it was All Better Now by Neil Shusterman. Wow. Yeah, it came to me. It was an interesting concept. So there's like another pandemic that breaks out, and the people that get it and survive end up just having complete contentment, which is an interesting concept to explore. Our main character is actually immune to the virus and hanging out with someone that has had it. So we get both sides. Very interesting. But in the end, there was just too many like agenda type things that kept getting thrown in there, and I can overlook certain ones or a certain amount, and then it just got to the point where I was like, no, I'm done. So I didn't get to see how it ended. And the last book that I read is one that I don't know how to rate or explain because I feel conflicted. It's The Summer of You and Me by Denise Hunter. This one is not out yet. I'm not sure when it's coming out, in the next few months. And I'd never read anything by Denise Hunter, but I was really intrigued by the premise where our main character, I think her name is Maggie, her husband died 5 years ago, I don't know, in Afghanistan or something like that. And she is in her husband's like hometown for the summer. It's his 5-year anniversary of his death. It's her summer to kind of like let him go. And she thinks she sees him at the carnival. And meanwhile, her brother-in-law this is kind of his summer that he wants to tell Maggie that he's been in love with her forever. And so he's kind of waiting for that, but then they see this guy that looks like Ethan, his dead brother, and so they explore that. And I was really intrigued to see, like, where is this going? So she actually got a picture of this guy, and so it's not like she could make it up. She showed it to the guy that she doesn't know that loves her. And he's like, oh yeah, that looks just like him. So it's not like, you know, she's seeing things. and I was just so curious to see like how is this gonna work out. And I thought I knew, and then I was like, no, not that. And then I thought I knew, and then no, not that. And then where it went, I was like, whoa, did not see that coming. So that was interesting. Really enjoyed that aspect of things. On the like romance side, no, I think Denise Hunter is more of a romance writer, so I kind of feel like maybe I shouldn't judge too harshly. I'm probably not the audience, but I was really intrigued by like the mystery aspect. But I felt like it was just a little much. First of all, Josh, the younger brother, he kept calling Maggie honey even before he professed any kind of love to her. And I'm like, you're not a like 50-year-old southern lady. You can't just randomly call people honey. He wasn't calling anyone else honey, it was just her. And so that felt awkward to me. And then once things progress, I mean, it's like a romance, so you kind of know where that's going to go. I just felt like it was a little too focused on the physical aspect of the relationship. So I didn't like that. So I had a really hard time rating it on Goodreads and stuff. I kind of gave it a different rating on Goodreads and Fable and Storygraph, I think, because I just didn't know. But really enjoyed the mystery aspects. You know, take that as it is. The Starlit Prince. So this is a fantasy, maybe YA, maybe adult, not really sure. And it's a marriage of convenience. So our main character right at the beginning, her father's prize racing horse is stolen. And it's like, if she does not get this horse back, then her father will be ruined. Like there's too much money riding on it, etc. So she follows the person that has stolen it, which is a guy that wants her hand in marriage. It's like if he can't have her hand, he wants to ruin her family, and then he's gonna try to get her hand. And he goes to the city to try to sell it. She follows after, and the man who gets the horse says, I will give you a horse that will win, but you have to marry me. And so it's a marriage of convenience, which I just don't like that name of a trope, because it's not convenient. It's a marriage of necessity, kind of. I feel like that's better. Anyway, so she takes it because she doesn't want her father to get ruined, and she doesn't want to marry this other guy who wants to marry her. So she does. She marries this guy, and I think she knows right before she marries him that he is one of the Fae. And they know that Fae can't lie, which is interesting. It adds an aspect to the story that's very interesting. What I really like is, okay, so right after they get married, they go to the Fae world, to his home there. And we know there's some kind of curse that he has. But what I really appreciate about this book that I feel like is different than a lot of other marriage of convenience type books is she goes in with such a good attitude. She made the decision to help her family out in this way. And she says she's gonna marry this guy, she does. And then she decides to try to like get to know him and try to be a good wife and like try to make the most of her life. Whereas so often I feel like in marriage of convenience books, they often go either like they get irritated or mad at the person that they've married, or they just kind of go on with their life and ignore the person that they've married. But she is like actively trying to get to know him, and I thought that was just very interesting. Unfortunately, he has a bit of a curse that he isn't telling her about and kind of complicates things. But it was really good, and I do want to read the second book. I do have it out on Kindle Unlimited, so hopefully I'll read that soon. And it was a bit of a Beauty and the Beast kind of retelling, generally kind of idea, so enjoyed that. Then, because I shared my update last week, I got to read another volume of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. So now I've read the first two, and it was still just as funny. So I don't know if I really shared much last time. Emma M. Lyon, she lives in London, but she lives in St. Crispin's, I think it's called, like this specific area of London, and it has a little bit of a separate feel than just being in London. So she goes to live what is her house, like at what is her house, but her uncle, it's in his trust until she turns of age. So she's living in the garret, and we just get to know her as she's helping her aunt slash her cousin make her cousin be like the most eligible lady of the season. And Emma just has such a little snarky humor that I really appreciate. It's very true to Victorian times and then also like feels kind of modern. It's a great combination. At the beginning of this second journal, I really enjoyed how we got reminded who all the characters were because Emma wrote a little bit about each of them, and just with her little humor that she has, I really appreciate. And I just really loved seeing some of the characters kind of continue to develop in this book. Emma has a tenant that is living on the other side of the garret. There's like a partition, and it's a different, kind of a different house, and she kind of gets to know him a little bit in this book. That was interesting. There's one point where she ends up reading somebody's journal, and when she goes to confess to them that she has read their journal, I was laughing out loud. It was hilarious. Really enjoyed that. Another thing that I really like is she capitalizes like important words, what she thinks are important words. And can I even think of any at the moment? Probably not. But especially in the first book, or in the first volume, it felt very, like you could tell which ones she was like, these are words of importance, and so I'm going to capitalize them. And you could even imagine her saying them out loud and like capitalizing them in the way she said them. And I don't know, I just really like that. Okay, those were my only ebooks. Now, physical books. I've got Mrs. Jeffries Takes Stock. So I read book 4 of Mrs. Jeffries, where we follow Mrs. Jeffries and the maids and servants and different people of the house as they try to solve a mystery pretty much for their inspector, but kind of let him think that he's solving it for himself. This one I did not find to be overly interesting. I solved it long before Mrs. Jeffries did. It was just kind of bland, I felt like. So at this point I'm kind of like, okay, I think I'm going to put this series on hold for a while. I can come back to it anytime. There's 20 plus volumes or books in this series. I'm in no rush to finish it. So it was a little disappointing. As much as I like to be able to solve a mystery in a book, I feel like if I have solved it, it's just not as fun. I finished a nonfiction, What God Has to Say About Our Bodies by Sam Alberry. And this is How the Gospel is Good News for Our Physical Selves. And like, honestly, this is very much what the book is. I thought it was very well done and interesting, but I also feel like I'm not really the target audience. I'm definitely keeping this book because I think it would be a really good resource maybe to like borrow out to people in the future. I feel like it's a much needed book for this weird world that we're living in. People that are so confused about like gender identity and stuff like that. Like I 100% feel like it's very needed. But a lot of it I was like, okay, yeah, I agree. That makes sense. It wasn't really surprising in any way. Not that it maybe should have, but his writing was easy to read and stuff. So if the topic is of interest to you, I would definitely recommend the book. Then I did read The Watsons by Jane Austen. And oh man, I wish she would have finished this story. So it is incomplete. She didn't finish it. She told some people maybe how she would have finished it. So there's potentially a way it would have ended. But I do think that maybe this would have been one of my favorite, like if she would have turned it into a full-length novel, it might have been one of my favorite Jane Austen books. I'm not sure it would beat out Lady Susan because that was just hilarious, but that one's not full length. I thought the formatting was very interesting though. Like there's almost no paragraphs in the Watsons. And when we switch from character to character, like if one character's talking and then the other, we just have like a line which has a word, like a dash kind of thing in between them. I mean, they do have quotation marks as well. But that was interesting. I was curious to know, like, is this how she wrote her rough drafts, or was this book going to be in that kind of format? That made it a little harder to read for sure. But I was enjoying our main character, Emma Watson. When she was like, I don't know how old, 5-ish maybe, she went to live with a rich aunt, and it was kind of assumed or told she was going to inherit the aunt's money. But then the aunt suddenly, years later, ran off with the guy and sent Emma back to her house. So now she's living in a poorer environment than she's used to, with a family that she's not used to. They don't know her anymore. She doesn't know them, a lower social standing. Very interesting, but she seems very respectful and she seems like a great character, so I would be curious to know how this would end. And I think there are people that have finished it, which is fine, and maybe I'll read one of those at some point, but I'm curious to know how Jane Austen would have like fully fleshed it out. And the last book, you guys, I get to talk about is Nicholas Nickleby. I just finished this morning. I had like 4 chapters left after I was supposed to be done reading for the morning, and I was like, you know what? I'm filming a wrap up. Let's just finish this off. And I did. And I think I enjoyed it. So, Nicholas Nickleby, if you don't want to know what happens, I would recommend not reading the blurb, because the blurb tells you what happens in like all the way up until the last few chapters. It's crazy. But we follow Nicholas Nickleby. His mother and his sister and him have been reduced in status because the father died and he was, I think, in debt, or he had no money. So they go from being like a fairly well-to-do family to needing financial help, trying to figure things out, trying to find jobs, etc. And they have a rich uncle. The father's brother is rich, but he doesn't want to help them out. And this book is fairly typical Dickens, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, there's a lot of terrible characters. And I know Dickens really liked to talk a lot about society back then, which is great. But for a while it was quite depressing. I was like, where are the nice people? Like, surely there were some nice people in the Victorian era. And we finally do get to meet them. I mean, Nicholas and his sister, they're great. Their mother, she continued to bother me all the way till the end. But I survived. Yeah, there's some good characters in here. Some that I didn't realize at the beginning how much I was going to enjoy them. There was a twist type thing in the last 5-6 chapters that I did not see coming. Like, I read it this morning and I'm still kind of like, what? I had no idea. There are some chapters that just didn't need to be there. That is the thing about like Dickens writing serially. I know it's often said that he got paid per word, and then it's also like said, you know, he didn't get paid per word. And while he didn't really get paid per word, I'm assuming he got paid per installment of the serial novel. And some of them were like, if you tried to publish this with a publisher now, they'd be like, cut that chapter, cut that chapter, cut that chapter. There's like a whole character whose storyline is just pointless in here. There's probably like a good 10 chapters that involve him that just don't need to, in my opinion. But oh well, that is just kind of what you seem to get for Dickens. So my next Dickens for next year is, which one? I mean, I'm not gonna start it till January, but just to give you an idea, I'm going in publication order of the books that I own. So the Pickwick Papers I read last year, Oliver Twist I read a number of years ago. Now I've read Nicholas Nickleby, and then my next one is The Old Curiosity Shop. That's right. I've read a very, very short little story to my kids about that, and I feel like it's almost the same story over again in some ways. So that'll be interesting. But that'll be next January. It's Secondary Target. I forget the author's name, but you'll be able to see. This one I heard about in the Christian booktuber recommendation video that I shared a couple weeks ago. Jane Reads shared about this book and it sounded really interesting. We know our main character has kind of had a traumatic past. Her mother and brother were killed in I think their home was being robbed or something when she was 13, and then her father moved them to a different city, and they've been like, they got a lot of security, and her dad is very overprotective. But now she's, I don't know, in her 20s or something, and she finds out she's kind of being targeted, stalked a little bit, and this book is her story. This is part of a series. I think each book they're doing the method where they follow a different character kind of from the story. I don't know how much more I can say because I feel like so much of it kind of was revealed as we went, but it's Christian suspense in a good way. I feel like I didn't see what was coming around every corner, and I can appreciate that a lot. So if you're looking for some Christian suspense that doesn't follow the exact formula that a lot of them do, check out that one for sure. I think the second book is not out yet, but it's coming soon. I want to continue the series. Either that or it did just come out. My plan is to continue the series for sure at some point. Then I read a homeschool book. I read Modern Miss Mason by Leah Bowden, and it was a good read. I've had some interactions with Leah over the years in the homeschool world via all my homeschool stuff I have going on. It was a really good kind of like summary of some Charlotte Mason stuff, but I wish it would have had more practical information. It was really lacking in that area, in my opinion. So it's not really one I want to reread anytime soon. And then Emma M. Lyon, I read volume 3, which was like over a week ago already. And so now I need to film this update so I can read the next one. It's still making me giggle. We are set in the Victorian times. It's heavy. There's a lot of like emotional stuff, but it's funny. When I finished reading it, I actually left a review, which I don't do very often, like written reviews, which I don't do very often on Goodreads and stuff, but I think my review was just a delight because that is just what those books are. They do have some heavy topics, but I feel like it's done in a way that you don't feel weighted down after. It's very, it's not like made light of, but there's just other things that make me feel good afterwards instead of completely emotionally drained, if that makes sense. I think I've shared one in every one of these clips in February. I've just been reading almost one a week, which is great. It's been fun. Definitely a series I want to own the physical copies of at some point, but I was saying this on Patreon too. I really don't like the covers of the physical books. I feel like the ebooks are nicer. Like the ebooks have the picture of a woman on the cover. The physical books are very plain, and then like there's nothing other than text, and then they're very bright colors often. And so I would like, hopefully in the future she'll do an edition where they're like a little bit more vintage looking. That's my hope. Then, okay, now we're on to some physical books here. Anne of Avonlea. Okay, so there is a whole live on this again. Shatona co-hosted with me. This is not the book that I thought it was. When I filmed my February TBR, I jumped over this book. I thought we were reading Anne of the Island. I mean, I knew we were reading Anne of Avonlea, but I forgot everything that happened in here. And then I was so confused until I realized, nope, there's a whole nother book. And it was good. I gave it 4 stars. It's not a favorite of mine. Definitely, I'm looking forward to Anne of the Island. That's the one that I just had a lot of fun reading. Not that this one wasn't fun. There's some new characters in here that are pretty funny, but I don't know. There's just not a whole lot of advancement to the plot in this book, I guess. I don't know if that's part of it. Not much happens. Well, all sorts of little silly daily things happen, kind of day-to-day things. But you can watch the live if you want more thoughts on that one. Then I've got The Queen's Resistance. So I finally finished this duology. I am slowly learning to not leave series so long. I need to read them closer together. And I did go back and read a summary of The Queen's Rising, just because I forgot what happened. And I really can't tell you what happens in this book because it's the second book in a series. And even the first book, how I have described it before, is only like the first portion of the book. The first half maybe. The second half and this book kind of go completely different, but I feel like it would be spoilery to say too much. So I don't know what to tell you. Other than it's fantasy, it is fairly political, which is normally an anti-buzzword for me, but I feel like it really worked in these books. For me, it was a solid 4-star series. One of the things I really enjoyed is there was a lot of references about light overcoming darkness. To my knowledge, Rebecca Ross is not a believer. Not sure. I don't think so. And then if she's not, that makes it even cooler. Like, I love it when you can see threads of the gospel story in secular books because it just shows how this is God's plan all along, and I really enjoyed that. There was so many references to it that I'm kind of thinking maybe she is a believer, because it seemed like more than would be accidental on her part. But I enjoyed that series for sure, but definitely read them closer together than like the 2 years or whatever it was that I read them in. And then my last book, which I am learning I'm going to continue series, is Archenemies. So my plan is to read Supernova pretty much right away so that I can be done this series and have read it closer together and not forget things. So first book is Renegades, and we follow Nova. When she was young, her family was murdered and she was waiting for the renegades to come help her, and they didn't. But her uncle, in quotation marks, her surrogate uncle, I guess, came and saved her, and he fought against the renegades. And so she is an anarchist, very much against the renegades. But in the beginning book of the first book, she infiltrates the renegades to kind of get to know some secrets so that she can help fight against them, I guess, take them down. And understandably, things get a little bit complicated. She realizes not everyone is as terrible as she's kind of always made them out to be. This book, this like second one, felt a little bit like a second book. Like, we're dragging a few things out. There were some interesting revelations, I guess, I think in this one. There were some interesting things done, I guess. But at the same time, I kind of feel like some of the stuff could have been taken out and we could just go on to book 3. So I am looking forward to finishing the series. But Marissa Meyer has been a really good author. Really enjoyed her whole Lunar Chronicles series, and everyone did say this was going to be a great series. So I'm looking forward to finishing it up, seeing how it all ends. I feel like I have some predictions, but I'm sure some things will be different as well. So that's my reading from the last 2 weeks, I think. The first one I finished is a homeschool book, actually. It's A Waking Wonder by Sally Clarkson. I won't really talk very long about this because this was my 3rd read through. So obviously it's a favorite book of mine. The subtitle is Opening Your Child's Heart to the Beauty of Learning. This was one of my books that I wanted to reread this year, and it's just encouraging, a little bit convicting. Like, I found more things to like highlight, so I have a bunch of highlights throughout here, and then I'll like, I don't know if you can see, there's just a bunch that I found to highlight this time that I haven't highlighted before, and some that I was like, okay, I need to underline this again. It's very inspiring for both the educational standpoint of homeschooling, but like raising children, the moral, the faith, like every aspect of parenting and homeschooling and raising children. So if you homeschool or want to and you haven't read this book, I would very highly recommend it. Then I finished my first middle grade March read, and this is The Road to After by Rebecca Lowell. This is a free verse story, which we'll talk about that first. I have read a lot of free verse novels. I really enjoyed them. This did not feel like a free verse novel. This felt like a regular novel, but they just spaced things, like they pressed enter in the middle of a line so that it would look like free verse. So I enjoyed the book, don't get me wrong here, but this didn't feel like a free verse novel. I don't know if it really should be a free verse novel. It felt just like a regular one, but they broke up the lines. Usually there's a little bit less filler words in free verse novels. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but in this one, our main character, she's 11 or so, I think, and right at the beginning, her and her 4-ish-year-old sister, who has not spoken yet, and her mother are getting removed from their home. The father, it's like a very abusive situation. It feels very cultish because he wouldn't let them leave the house. Like there's, like it's a lot of abuse stuff, but it feels like a cult, kind of like small scale. But the mom made some secret plans and got them away. And so this is their time, pretty much about a year after being removed, and like the healing that occurs. You know, they first go live with their grandparents, and then the mom wants to get a degree, so they go to another place for her to do some school, and like, you know, the challenges they encounter with not really having interacted with people before, not being allowed to, just lots of different things. A lot of like dealing with trauma and trying to recover from that. Really well done. And then when I got to the afterword, I found out that this is based off of the author's true story. So she was in a domestic abuse situation with her kids, I believe. So she's kind of like the mother in this situation, which it just makes it so much more powerful. I wish that a lot of times that stuff would be written or included before I read the book, because I would generally like it more then. That reminds me of the book by Susan May Warren, where it's about this woman that's in witness protection program. What's the book called? It's the one and only Susan May Warren book I've read, and I can't think of the title, so I'll pop it up here. And like witness protection, very interesting to begin with. But then in the afterword, you realize this whole book was inspired because one time she was on an airplane, she was sitting next to an older woman that was going to say goodbye to her daughter because her daughter was going into witness protection. And the mother didn't know when she was going to see her again. I was like, man, I wish I would have known that throughout this whole book. And that's how I felt about this as well. I just wish I would have known that this was based off a true story. It was good. It was very heavy, but I think it was very well done. I really liked that our main character, she really healed through nature, learning about birds. They weren't allowed to go outside without their dad's permission before, or so pretty much ever. So she starts to learn the birds, and she does some drawing, and there's like a lot of nature aspects of it too that I really like. So if you're looking for a quick, very quick middle grade March read, I would recommend it. Okay, and then the last book that I finished is The Tempest at Annabel's Lighthouse. The last book for now. I'm pretty sure I should finish like another one or two, hopefully, before I share this video. So I already described what the book was about earlier. Okay, so our main character in the modern times, Shay, she is at this lighthouse to do this writing. Right off the bat, she's complaining about her husband, who didn't really want to come with her on this trip, or he's not comfortable with change, so he's at home. She's just kind of like ragging on him a little bit. And then the guy that's renting this house to her, she's got like an attraction to. So right off the bat, I was like, I don't think Jamie Jo Wright's gonna take this to an area where I don't want it to go, but like, I was worried. And then our main character kept talking about like self-care and how much she just needed to take care of herself, and that part was really annoying me. Okay, this is slightly spoilery, so if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead like 20 seconds. Thankfully, nothing happens in regards to her attraction to this guy that she's renting the house from, and she does have a lot of character growth. But a lot of my thoughts through the book were just like tense, worried she was going to do something about it. Thankfully it didn't happen. Other than that, like, I really enjoyed the past timeline as we were with Rebecca. I enjoyed finding out about her as she found out about herself, because she couldn't remember. That is always an interesting trope for me, like the amnesia trope. So I really liked her timeline. I really liked how things played out there. And then the only thing is the ending, I was like, wait, what? And obviously it's the ending, so I can't say anything. But if things turned out the way that I think they did, or if that like there was like one line, then I'm like, that, and I don't think it ruins the whole book or anything like that. But I think if what I read is right, I'm a little disappointed in that as well. So unfortunately, it's not one of my favorite books by Jamie Jo Wright. Thankfully, she has lots of other great ones out there. I liked certain aspects of it, but just not an absolute favorite. Okay, and then I should be back, hopefully in a couple days, sharing a couple more books, a book or two, we'll see. Okay, popping in with one more book to update you on. It's a middle grade book, so they're quick reads. March always has a bigger stack of books, because so many middle grade books means quicker reads, means more books. If you're curious about how I've decided on the order that I'm reading my middle grade books this month, I filmed a video for Patreon where I read the first 10 lines of most of the middle grade books that are kind of on my stack for this month, my pile of possibilities. I shared a lot of those books in a previous video. I read the first 10 lines and I ranked them, and I found that there are some childhood prejudices of mine that were pretty strong. There was a certain topic that made a book go to the very bottom of the stack, which was kind of funny. I didn't realize I had all these internal feelings. But that is how I am reading the order I'm reading the books in, minus I didn't read the first lines of books that are in a series because I didn't want to give any spoilers for anyone. So the next one that I read was Restart. This one actually was the best first lines, but I had already started The Road to After, or whatever that one was called. So this one has some great first 10 lines. It is about a kid named Chase. He fell off of the roof of his house and lost his memory, and they didn't think he was even going to make it, but he woke up and they found out that he has amnesia. So we've got the amnesia trope again, and so we got to be with Chase as he discovered who he is. He quickly learns, and we learn, that he was kind of a terrible person before he fell off the roof, and that's not who he is anymore. He used to be this football jock that bullied some people so much that one of the kids actually went to boarding school as a result. He was just a terrible guy. And then he kind of comes back and he realizes, oh, he actually likes some of the people that he used to bully. I mean, they're terrified of him, but he just does a 180, a complete personality change, and it's very interesting to see him realizing like the kind of person that he used to be. Ironically, I just had a kid interruption and now I feel like I have amnesia, which is a common thing for me because I just have a terrible memory. Anyway, Restart, really good. It's told mostly from Chase's perspective, but we do get some other people's perspectives. We get the some chapters from some of the kids that were bullied, some chapters from the football guys that were his friends before, and it's just really good. There's some like laugh out loud lines, and I really enjoyed watching Chase discover who he was and then who he was going to be. You know, is he going to revert back to his old self? Is he going to stay the way he is now? Like all that stuff. Yeah, so this was a fairly quick read, very enjoyable, definitely recommend it. I'm totally putting it on my 11-year-old's list for school for next year because I think he'll really enjoy it as well. So definitely recommend it. The next one is it a surprise at all? It is another Emma M. Lyon. So I read volume 4. And like I said, I have been only allowing myself to read one per wrap up. So I finished it quite a few days ago and I haven't been able to start a new one. And I probably won't be able to start a new one for a while because like I said, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with the books I have to read. But Emma M. Lyon, still loving her. Volume 4, very emotional. So if you haven't heard any of my other wrap-ups about Emma M. Lyon, we're like set in 1883, I think. And she is a young woman who's about to turn 21, has come back to London in this little area called St. Crispin's. And at the age of 21, she will come into her money, or it's currently been in trust with her uncle. And he has not treated it well. He has squandered most of her money. And so we are with her while she's trying to figure out how to be thrifty, how to make money. She's got such a great sense of humor. There's some great characters. These are diary entries. I just love it. Like, I just love the whole experience. And I have said previously that it's like she's light and funny, but there is some heaviness to it and some grief. A friend of hers died 3 years prior to her writing these journals, and she really comes head on with that grief in this volume. I found it personally relatable. I also lost a friend as a teenager, a close friend, and so I feel like some of my grief came out. I definitely cried while reading some of it. And the like positive side of the book is she really makes some good friends in this one. Like, you can see the friendships starting in the first 3 volumes, but in this one I feel like, okay, they're like locked in as friends and they really rally around her. Really enjoyed that. And then we just like sticking with the grief. The next book that I finished was Jupiter Rising by Gary D. Schmidt. Now this is a companion novel to Orbiting Jupiter, which I would highly recommend reading first. This one would be a great standalone, but it's just so much better if you know the backstory, right? So how much can I say? Not much. In Orbiting Jupiter, and well, both books, we follow a boy named Jack. Yes, his name's Jack. Why am I blanking? Yes, he was adopted from foster care when he was a baby, under 2-ish, maybe, around 2. And in Orbiting Jupiter, a teenage boy comes and lives with them from foster care. And in Jupiter Rising, they have a little baby, about a 2-year-old, I think, again. Well, she starts out in Orbiting Jupiter as 2. They foster her, and Jupiter Rising is their attempt to adopt her. And once again, this was like relatively emotional, because not that we can adopt our foster children, but as we've had like ups and downs with the whole foster care journey, this was just so relatable, and it also made me cry. It's really short, you can tell, like it's just under 200 pages, but the font is huge, the margins are huge, even like the start of the chapter starts really low down. Yeah, like start of the chapter starts way down here. So I read it in under 2 hours. That was with multiple interruptions by my 4-year-old, so a very quick read. Definitely a tearjerker. But I highly recommend reading Orbiting Jupiter first. 5 stars, for sure. And then the last one I just finished last night. I read the first book in the Guests of War trilogy. So the first one is called The Sky is Falling. This is by Kit Pearson. And I did mention in last week's video that the way that I'm choosing to read my middle grade books is I read the first 10 lines over on Patreon and ranked them, and then I'm reading them in that order. Jupiter Rising was not one of those books because it is a second book. I didn't know if any of the first 10 lines were going to be spoilers, so I didn't read this one. So I've got some that will sneak in here and there that are consecutive books in a series. But in The Sky is Falling, we follow a girl named Nora. I think she's 10. She is living in England, is it Kent? And World War II is going on. Right at the beginning of the book, a plane has been shot down and lands pretty close to the village that she lives, and her parents end up sending her to Canada to be a guest of war. She is one of, I don't remember how many kids they sent over. They ended up stopping it earlier than they probably would have because one of the boats got hit and sank. So nearly 15,000 British children were evacuated overseas. Nearly 8,000 of them came to Canada. Yeah, so Nora and her 5-year-old brother, Gavin, go to Canada. They end up going to live with this older lady in Toronto and her spinster daughter. And it's a situation where they wanted Gavin, they wanted a cute little boy to replace an older boy that died, and they dote on him and they spoil him and like smother him. And Nora is angry and feeling lonely and unwanted. She didn't want to leave her home because she had this group with these boys. She was very much a tomboy, where they were always, someone was always looking for planes, and you know, they really wanted to help with the war effort. And now she's sent to Canada where they're safe, but she's kind of bored, you know. She has a hard time fitting in at school. She goes from being a popular girl to being like completely ignored, and it's very hard for her. It's also, her attitude was not one where she was really trying to make friends a ton. she was kind of hard to sympathize with at first. Thankfully, there is a lot of character growth, and by the end, I was like, okay, I do like her. I do think I will read the next 2 books at some point. I don't think I will read them during this month, but the next one is Looking at the Moon, where she's been in Canada for 3 years. When her parents sent her away, they said perhaps a year, so she kind of hung on to that for a while. And then at the end of the book, she realizes, oh, it's probably going to be longer. So that's hard. So she's there for 3 years, and then in the 3rd book, The Lights Go On Again, it's been 5 years, and I think they're probably about to go back to England. So, and I think that one maybe is from Gavin's point of view. So I will read those at some point. We do not have many books about World War II set in Canada. There are some Dear Canada ones, or at least one, but not much else. I think the author did a really good job, so I'm curious to see how the upcoming books go. Okay, so the first book that I finished is Magnify, which is the first book in the Storm and Spire series by Stephanie Lozinski. This, according to Amazon, is a 5-book series, and they're all on Kindle Unlimited. And because I currently have Kindle Unlimited, I'm thinking about continuing the series in the next few months, trying to finish them. So like I said, I will be live on Charlene's channel. I think it's the last Saturday of the month. I'll have those details in the description. And we'll be talking about this book. So I don't want to say too much right now, but just to give you an idea, we are following a young man, he's 17, named Wes. He is the envoy for this land. His parents were the king and queen, his brother was the prince, but he has a moon scar, which means he's the envoy. He's the person that takes the sacrifices for the land to a mountain, and I don't know why he has to do it. Right at the beginning of the book, I think maybe he has to go 4 times a year. He's on that journey, and the guards that are with him, the 2 guys that are with him, end up getting murdered. It turns out there's like a lot of unrest in the land that's kind of starting. Like things are not acting in their natural way. We also follow a dragon as another one of our characters. I had to message Celestria because the dragon's name is Celestria. So it's spelled just like her name, but instead of the T, it's a Y. And Celestria is the one that gifted me this book in our book exchange that we had at Christmas. So I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah, and so Celestria has been reading the writings that are in the Dwarven libraries, and she has come across some old writing, which kind of, if what she has come across is true, it means that everything that they've kind of been living is a lie. So the dragons have been suddenly, no one really knows why, I don't think, dying over the last while, and like very quickly dying, and she thinks she's come across the reason why, but then that means like all of their religious beliefs are kind of just based on a lie. And she meets Wes and tells him about this, and that's all I'll say about like what happens in the book right now. Overall thoughts, it took me a little while to get my bearings, as it does in fantasy books. I do feel like there was a few things that could have been expanded a little bit more. I feel like there was a few things that like I'm not sure if I'm supposed to know yet. I feel like maybe I'm supposed to know, and maybe it just wasn't written out in enough detail. But maybe it will come up in the next few books. But our main character, Wes, I do struggle in books when authors make characters kind of he's not unlikable, but he is very down on himself physically and like always focusing on the negative, which I can understand, but sometimes there needs to be a bit of a balance. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of positives going for him, so I struggle when I don't care about a character too much. There are some things, like there's some growth and there's some things that happen that do make me like him more as the book goes on. But yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about this, since we're going to have a live talking about, I'm sure, a lot more of the story. Overall, I'm interested enough that I want to see the series through. I'm not sure if I'll get it in the next, I probably only have like a month or so left of my Kindle Unlimited. I got 3 months for free, and I want to finish the Emma M. Lyon series. So I don't know if I'm gonna pick up one of those books yet this week. I mean, you guys will know by this point. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I do want to continue the series. Okay, so I don't have much of my voice left, but I do want to wrap up Fighting Words. So this book by Kimberly Brew Baker Bradley, the lighting is having an issue. Let's go with that. It is very hard, like I said. It is. So we follow this girl named Della. Her real name is Delicious. And then she's 10, and she's got a 16-year-old sister, Suki. Their mother went to jail when Della was like 5-ish. She was cooking meth in a hotel room, and it blew up. And then Suki and Della went to live with this guy named Clifton. I think it was their mother's boyfriend. And he obviously did something to Suki in the years that they were living with him. And they, right at the beginning of the book, or like right before the book, got taken away from him and have moved in with a foster mom. So we hang out with Della while she is processing so much stuff. It is a really heavy book. This is another one, like I mentioned recently, I think 2 weeks ago, that sometimes these author notes would be really good to have at the beginning. Apparently, this is inspired by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley's childhood. The first thing that the author's note says is, the first thing I want you to know is, it happened to me. And so you know she's not just like trying to write this really hard story just to write a really hard story. I appreciate that. But the contents of this book, for a child who has not been sexually abused, like, I don't want that in their hands at the age of 10. So I really struggle with that. Like, I think it's written really well. I think it should be marketed as YA though. And then like it doesn't even say like middle grade, it says children's fiction on my library copy here, or what was a library copy. I just really struggle with that because it's a bit descriptive, and the main character is 10, so you kind of assume you're kind of gearing towards writing for that age. And if a child has been in this situation, I feel like it's really good for them to have a resource and to learn that people need to have your permission to touch you. Like, they shouldn't be just touching you. So I feel very torn on this book. It is very good. Yeah. But yeah. So conflicting thoughts there, but very well written, very good. I just worry about who might pick it up, but then also want certain people to pick it up. I'm very torn. So I recommend it to adults or people that are older than 10 for the most part. Hopefully my next book will be a little bit lighter and happier, and I could just go for a really light read next. Emma M. Lyon, Volume 5. What can I say that I have not already said with volumes 1 through 4? If you have not started the series yet, and you watch my channel, and you like some of the books I like, start this series. It is so good. It is such a perfect balance of light and funny and heavy and serious and just like life, I feel like. You know, you can be going through a hard time but still find joy in the everyday moments. Yeah, Emma is finding some good friends. She is slowly making her way out of her grief. I just don't know if I could even pick a favorite book out of the series. I love them all. I 100% want to own the physical copies. After I'm done reading what is currently out, I'm going to debate whether I'm waiting to see if, because I've mentioned before, I like the covers for the Kindle books, which is also the covers for the hardcovers. I just don't like the colors. I feel like this is such a, because it's set in the 1800s, it has such a classic feel. Like they should all be in a, I could really see a navy blue or like a dark green with gold foil being like perfect. And the covers right now are so vibrant that I'm kind of like, maybe I just buy the paperbacks because they're cheaper, and then if she ever releases them in a nice edition, maybe like once they're all out, get that. I don't know, but like 100% worth owning for sure. This particular one, I mean, we're like 5 books in. How much can I say? Like, and in some ways nothing happens. Like we just follow Emma as she goes throughout her days. But in this one, a favor is called in that she needs to do something for, and I had no idea where this was going, and it was perfect. There are a few characters, I mean, I kind of love all the characters. This one kind of tells us that eventually Emma will find a love, and I'm assuming it is one of the guys that is an option. But as of right now, it's not like some books where you're like, oh, she's gonna end up with this guy. Like, there's multiple options. They're all great options. There's different things great about each of them. And right now she's just really good friends with them all. So I'm just so excited to see where it goes. Also, how many books are going to be in this series? Like, I am enjoying it. The problem is that once I'm caught up, I have to wait for more books, and I'm not going to do well with that. That's going to be a struggle. So like, how many books is this going to be? As of right now, it has, oh, I can't remember when it started. It has not been a full year yet of her journals. She obviously writes a lot in her journals, a lot more than I do, which is, I mean, maybe her life is just definitely more interesting. Yeah, so I don't have much to say because it is book 5. You can check my other reading wrap-ups for more details if you want, but highly recommend checking it out. And it is on Kindle Unlimited. I'll leave a link below. Sometimes, like if you haven't had a Kindle Unlimited subscription in a long time, sometimes you can get it for free or like 99 cents for 3 months, or sometimes it's 99 cents for a month. Like, everyone kind of has their own deal. It's not necessarily like you click this and you will definitely get it free. It's weird how that works, but definitely worth checking it out. I got a free Kindle Unlimited 3-month thing right now, and I definitely would have paid for this, which I will because I'm going to buy the physical books. So please let me know if you've started Emma M. Lyon, and if you're loving the series as much as I am. She's just so great. First up is Prophet by Frank Peretti. So I was reading this in my reading vlog last week, and I really realized after filming that, after reading for a week and stuff, that just focusing on one book at a time is so much better for my brain, and I read faster. And I don't know why I was trying to read from so many books, other than there were some that were not as interesting to me, so I wanted to add in some others. But then it just made the books that weren't interesting take longer. And so now what I've been doing is trying to finish all these books that I've started, and I'm just realizing I read much faster, which can be good and cannot be sometimes. Like, reading fast is not the goal, and sometimes when I read slower, I remember more. So there's like certain books I want to read slower, but it's also just more immersive to read a book quicker. So there's benefits both ways. But I finished Prophet. This was my kindred spirit for March's pick, and this is by Frank Peretti. We mostly follow a guy named John. He is a news anchor. He starts hearing voices, and his father passes away, and he kind of realizes like he has been put on this path to find the truth and share the truth. And so yeah, there is kind of this like mystery type of thing that comes up. there are a couple of young girls that have died that John's father was kind of looking into, and then they think maybe he was murdered because he was looking into this. And there's a lot of the storyline I really like. I found certain parts really choppy, like each chapter would follow different people. Like, you know, you'd have a couple pages with one person, then there's a little bit of a paragraph break, and then you have maybe like a 4-line paragraph following someone else, and then we've got a longer paragraph following someone else, and then we're like it was a lot of back and forth, and I struggled with that a bit. And then also there were certain things, like when John was starting to like hear and see things, that I found very confusing, hard to follow, but I liked a lot of the story. So I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe 3.5. Definitely not my favorite by Peretti. I have some of his that I really enjoy, but I'm glad I read it. Then I read a book, what's it called? The Castle Rose by Tabitha, whatever it says up there. This was a retelling spin-off that has Beauty and the Beast vibes and apparently Phantom of the Opera. I've never read Phantom of the Opera, so I don't know, but we follow 2 characters mainly. One has just moved to New Orleans. She is going to help at a bookstore, work at a bookstore, which is just great vibes. And the first day she sees this guy on the trolley and kind of has this connection. And then we kind of find out that that guy, because this is our other main character, so this is like present day-ish, but in 1923 he was a famous jazz piano player, or just piano player, and then he was cursed, and he has been in this weird state of not dead but not alive for 100 years, and people can't see him. This girl, Odette I think is her name, she was the first person to be able to see him in 100 years. And so she tries to help him break this curse. I really enjoyed the story. There's a lot of good quotes about love and courage, and it's a really good found family story. I mentioned to the booktuber book club that I'm a part of that this would be a really good one for the found family prompt. I really enjoyed it. I'm thinking about putting it on my bookish wish list, because I just read the ebook, because I feel like some of those quotes on like courage and love I just want to underline and own. So really enjoyed that. And then the last one is The Mythmakers by John Hendricks. This is the Remarkable Fellowship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I shared an overabundance amount of flip throughs and pages in my last video. I loved it. So it's narrated by this lion and this wizard. It's part graphic novel, part like non-fiction information, really well done, about a little bit of backstory on each of the guys and their relationship and the Inklings and their publishing. And when I finished it, I instantly posted to Instagram and just said it was a treasure, because that is how it feels. I am making everyone in my house read this book now. Well, those that can read. I'm putting it on Jared's stack next, and then it's going to go on Reka's, and then it'll go on Ephraim's shortly after that. Highly recommend it. I really enjoyed his version of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's biography when he did The Faithful Spy. It's kind of in the same format, but this is even better, which is that possible? I'm not sure. I so hope that he continues making biographies like this. It's such a great way to do it. I was just hooked. Highly recommend that. And now some thoughts on Anne of the Island. I still do want to do a live for this. This might be coming next week. My next week is just very busy this current week. So if I can find some time next week, I'd like to do a live, because this is one of my favorite Anne books. I think I really enjoy the first one because of it just being the first one. I really love her in this one, and Rilla of Ingleside has really grown on me ever since I read it. I didn't love it necessarily in the moment, but I've loved it since. So out of the 8 books, I have 3 that I feel like are pretty distinct favorites. I'm curious after this reread how I will feel, if I will stay true all the way through or once I'm done. So without giving too many spoilers, Anne of the Island is when Anne goes off to college. So she did some time at Queen's and now she's going to Redmond, right? She's going to Nova Scotia. She goes with Priscilla Grant, Gilbert, and Charlie Sloane. They're the people from Avonlea that go. But while she's there, she meets some new characters. We've got Phil. I don't remember what her full name is. Oh, Philippa Gordon. And she is quite the character. They end up renting a house for 3 out of the 4 years, which is really good. The first year she lives right by a cemetery. And there was some, I think there was a quote about something about a cemetery, just how she enjoyed walking through them and stuff. And I feel like that is exactly how I feel about them. Anne loves a good cemetery and so do I. And so we follow her through 4 years of time at college. On my Patreon yesterday, we talk about books that we loved throughout the month and sometimes rant about some that we didn't. And we were talking a little bit about Anne, and none of us could quite remember how many marriage proposals she got, even though I just finished the book. I thought it was like 4. So we stayed on a little extra long to not spoil it for those who wanted to hop off and not get spoilers. And we counted the proposals. She gets 6 marriage proposals in this book. That's a lot. And I know L.M. Montgomery got quite a few as well, so I feel like this book is kind of based on her experiences. And some of them are pretty funny. They're like cringy. I mean, there's something about, you know, the idea of a marriage proposal that makes a person feel like pretty good, you know, if you're going to get multiple. At the same time, I think some of these made her feel like the opposite of that because of how they were done. I highly recommend continuing with the Anne series if you haven't. I'm doing a read along all year. You guys can catch up if you haven't. Would love to have you guys join in and fall even more in love with Anne. So that is all for my February and March wrap-ups. I think it's probably going to be another really long video, but I've got the timestamps. Hopefully that will help you guys. I would love to hear what you have been reading recently. Is there some books that you've been loving, some that you think I would love and should check out? Always let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here, guys.